Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy, the Schizomaniac here. Back at it again with another one. So, kind of wanted to talk about something that I haven't really made a video about in a while, particularly because I haven't had a reason to. But after re-picking up and going through the manga again, kind of wanted to do a video on why I enjoy Sekirei so much as a harem, and I think objectively, this I think is my favorite harem of all time. Which is funny because I would say in a lot of ways, Sekirei wasn't my first harem, but Sekirei was like one of my first harems. Like, my very first harem which I own, is a show called Mahabarajo, which is essentially a show that goes through that very, very stereotypical harem vibe. And granted, it's not like Sekirei doesn't go into the same realm, but I like the progression and transformation of the characters and interaction, because Sekirei is kind of like a harem mixed with like a lot of government and not religious, but I guess government intrigue. Like a bunch of like, oh, here's the secret company of MBI, and it's controlling all these Sekirei behind the scenes, and like, well, what's the true goal of Sekirei? What are Sekirei really? It's like, it has like the elements of like, it's obviously a harem. Like, the core of it is a harem. The core of it is Minato, Musabi, Tsukiyumi, Ku, Kazehana, Matsu, Kagari. The core of it is that harem aspect, right? The core of it is that fan servicey relationship slash action. I think if anything, the NBI stuff allows it to get away with a bunch of action set pieces, which if you read the manga, although are cool, aren't anything crazy. But I do like the fact that it correlates with their relationships. For example, I think, I want to say it's during the Kagari arc, where like I believe Tsukiyumi and Musabi both get new moves. Where I think Musabi's is that bear punch, and Tsukiyumi gets like this. It's funny, and it's funny because they're tied to their emotions, where they're both like annoyed that another girl is potentially getting in the way of their relationship with the guy they both like, Minato. And it all culminates in this, like, also because they've been running with the bear thing with Musabi for a while now. Where, like, Musabi, there was, like, hints of it in other chapters beforehand until it culminated into, like, this giant bear manifestation. Which, by the way, she's still correlated with a bear even through the entirety of the series. And I hate the fact that the anime never really got to show off what I view as some of the cooler and nicer moments. Because even with all that political intrigue in the history behind Sekirei, especially like the mystery surrounding Musabi and the Yume, I believe is what her other self is called. It's been a minute since I've checked it, but like, even with all that shit going on, the best parts to me about Sekirei are all the slice of life aspects. And the fact that Minato doesn't do like this insane, going from like being kind of a weak-hearted, low temperamental guy to like this absolute badass. He's kind of a badass in the constraints of his own self. Pretty much saying that you don't have to be like this insane, ridiculous goat to fucking like still be able to touch and change people and to become a better person in yourself. Like, by the end of the series, Minato's personality is pretty much the same as it was in the beginning. He's just more confident in his own abilities, which kind of gets it, to me, I think is a better life lesson than like, oh, I was looking at the world a certain way. There's a certain reason why I don't really care for shows that go out of its way to be edgy and shit. Like Freezing, for example, I think is a good example of a harem that is trying to be edgy so hard. A lot of people always ask me, oh, what's the appeal of harem anime? What attracts you to them? And of course, if you're a guy or someone who's uninitiated, the thing that usually comes up the most is, well, obviously it's the panty shots, obviously it's the fan service, it's the ability to it's essentially like it's a fantasy that you can flip places with the main character and be the guy in this ridiculous ass harem of a bunch of beautiful women of varying size and shapes, because you know everybody's different. And people go, oh, that's what you're interested in, right? That's the part about a harem anime that interests you. For me, it's always been kind of the more interesting of the romance. Like, one of the things, I'll give you an example. Like, I enjoy Sekirei immensely more than I enjoy Nisekoi. Even though Nisekoi essentially is a harem anime that actually develops into like I like this one person, right? Even shows like Toradora that technically is meant to be like a one-on-one romance thing. At a certain point, Ryuji has like 3 girls who are into him. Like, that's the game. Like, it's funny to me that people always talk that shit about harem anime, but I'm like, half your favorite romance shows literally do the same thing. The difference is that they just, at the end of it, commit to like one girl, which I'm not saying that's necessarily a terrible thing, but I feel like there's certain nuances that are missed between the girls because of it. But for me, Sekirei is a show that actively kind of goes out of its way to like try to develop the other girls and the like side characters in their relationships. Give you an example. Tsukiyumi, I think when you first meet her in the beginning of the series, is on some like, I am a lone bitch and you can't control me, right? She's very much like a woman who is very much like, I'm like, pretty much she's like one of those independent types, right? And then when Minato ends up winging her, which is essentially convincing her that he's a man worthy of being with her because he didn't do what Seiyo did in that episode where he fucking tries to like manhandle her. Even though Seiyo could have easily gotten away with it, Minato proved that just because you're a fucking dickhead and you try to like force yourself on a girl, that shit won't work, right? And Tsukiyumi, through the relationships with all the other Sekirei Minato has different tiers. Like how she looks at Musubi as like a direct rival, whereas she looks at Kagure more as like a sibling rivalry. It's kind of hard because they're both rivals, but Kagure's rivalry with her is more on the sense of them being both like in their own shit and they still want to do their own thing. Like one of the things about Homura, I keep switching between Kagure and Homura, that's because his name switches, his or her name switches, which I think, by the way, being my favorite character, his name switches a lot during the series because he has like his real name and then he has like his fake superhero-ish name, which is one of the reasons why Minato's relationship with him flips a lot between being like a relationship and also like him looking up to Kagure. Like it very much flips, which in a very much way I believe Yumi and Kagure's relationship is the same way. I think they're both like sibling relationships. Where Musubi and Tsukiyumi, it's very much like two sisters going for the same guy. Whereas it like with her and Homura, she's trying to get. It's almost like Musubi's ahead of Homura in that situation, and so she's straight trying to goad him. And I actually like that because there's a transformation you notice throughout the series where like Kagure already had interest in Minato beforehand. And then once he got winged after his whole issue with his flames and how uncontrollable and unstable him and his body were, his mind and his body, he finally found some peace once he finally got winged by Minato. And then the rest of the series, you notice that like Tsukiyumi has become influencing Kagure to be more like proactive in his interest in what he actually is interested in, which is Minato. Which is funny because by the end of the series, they're flirting relatively hard. It's actually pretty adorable. Just because of the transitioning. For those who don't know Kagure's whole deal and you didn't watch the second season of the anime, Kagure is, when you're first introduced to Kagure, he looks like a slim-figured dude. And apparently, I think it's due to his unstable nature and from what I understand the power of an Ashikabi, they can sometimes mold their Sekirei into what they want them to be. So in a way, because Minato's attracted to women, Kagure gain like female attributes. And I like how the series doesn't back down from it in the sense of like being like, well, no, he's still a guy, but there is a growing, but like they didn't try to like cop out and make him all female. Like you can, like I don't think it's ever explicitly said that he still has his parts, but the last time it's mentioned he still has his parts. So my assumption is that he has both, and like he's developing his relationship with Minato properly. But I find it absolutely adorable that like when he starts getting like all touchy-feely with Minato, part of it is the way he always explains it is that it's like a sickness. Like he explains that Tsukiyumi is like made him sick, and that's where like all his weird like romantic interest in Minato comes from. Although by the end of the series he doesn't do that anymore. He does that up until a point, and then eventually he kind of just acknowledges that he's interested in himself. He needs to stop copping out, which is part of the reason why I find the Tsukiyumi Musubi interactions different, because they're both just aggressively into Minato. The difference is that Tsukiyumi is like a jealous older sister about it, whereas Musubi is just naturally flirting. Which is also funny because they do the whole thing like I mentioned earlier with the bear thing, where like Musubi gets jealous, but it's like in this weird interactive way. And one of the cutest moments that happens in the last couple of chapters, because of what happens plot-wise with Musubi, is that Musubi isn't around for a period of time. I'll just explain that. And fucking the girls, all the girls who end up having moments with Minato during this time period are all like paranoid / insecure about like trying to get a leg up on her, as if they're taking advantage of the situation. Like Tsukiyumi even goes as far as to yell out into the sky, like, Musubi, I'm not trying to get ahead of you, right? And I think one of the best lines is like, Minato's about to do Norito with Tsukiyumi, and it's right after she says it. She goes like, Musubi, I'm not trying to get ahead of you or anything. And fucking Minato grabs her by the chin and goes, you're so sincere, that's what I love about you, and kisses her, which causes the Norito. That's a subtle change in between Minato as a character from the beginning of the series to the end of it. Where in the beginning he was like super. Every kiss that he shared with those girls was primarily through either he forced it in winging them, or in most cases he was kissed by them. Now that he's initiating the kisses, I find that interesting. I know this is like dumb shit context for you guys, but Sekirei is one of those shows that like hits a good balance between being like, here's a plot line going on, and then here's a bunch of like harem character development type shit. I didn't even talk about like Ku and Shi-chan and Matsu and Kazehana, and like how each of the girls kind of correlate differently to a part of Minato's personality. Like Matsu being the genius, she's the one who kind of like tests Minato and realizes, dude, you're smart as fuck, you just don't have a lot of confidence. He's like one of them types, like, you find out that Minato's smart as hell, and they even do the whole thing where like the main character's correlated with the main villain, if you want to call him that. Like, they do that, and then how like Kazehana has a thing, her first like relationship interest was the president of MBI. And so Minato at a certain point goes, well, like, it's kind of hard, like, it's not that I don't want to be intimate with you, but like, but he's going through like inferiority complex. He's stacking himself up to her previous, pretty much what guys do anyway, where you stack yourself, sometimes guys who aren't secure in themselves as people tend to stack themselves up to the previous boyfriend. A couple of harem and romance anime do this anyway, like, oh, well, he was my first. Like, there's a couple of shows where it's like, here's a guy introduced, they used to be closer to the main girl than you were, and now it becomes like this insecurity thing. I like how it's done in Sekirei, though, where it's not like the crux of an arc. Like, the Sekirei to me will always be the harem that has a good balance of everything. Like, if you're interested in the lore of Ashikabi and Sekirei, you get that. The history of MBI, you get that. The anime doesn't even get to touch even close on those elements. And people, when they talk about Sekirei, always talk about the fan service, because that's kind of what Sekirei's. That's the thing that would get a normal person into the show. But once you get into the show, it's very much different than that. And I feel like Sekirei doesn't get enough praise or enjoyment out of it, because harems are always put down, because it's always a bunch of fantasy shit. Well, duh, but then again, you could argue romance animes do the same fucking thing. It's not like every show can be a fantasy in someone's mind, right? I feel like, but harems allow me to enjoy romance on a better level. In a lot of ways, harem animes do romance better than the fucking main shows. There are some shows that handle romance alright. A lot of them fucking don't. Harems at least give me some sense of entertainment value, while potentially giving me more characters to develop with. Because, man, have you ever watched a romance show where you couldn't stand like one of the two main characters, and in a show where that's like the main relationship, you're like, man, this is bullshit. I own the manga for Sekirei. I bought the anime DVD for Sekirei in the beginning, and then I bought the Blu-rays for it later. Like, Sekirei is my favorite harem anime, so I feel that I need to come out here and have these discussions. And of course, we're not getting to season 3 anytime soon, even though the manga's been done for years. They literally have a complete story. No issues or none of that shit. I bet you will never get a fucking season 3 in this bitch. They'll have to reboot it if they ever want to do it. And harem animes, unfortunately, don't get that kind of love and appreciation. Harem animes will never get that kind of, like, cult fandom, because anyone who's looking for that will always be called like a weirdo. Like, oh, you're into some weird shit because you want to see more Sekirei. You probably ain't got a girlfriend. All that other dumb shit. But I think it's just a well-written story. I think it has good characters. a lot of interesting plot and lore to it. And I think it genuinely has. Unfortunately, it just has a weak ass season 2. The season 2 is like, I think half of season 2 is alright. There's some good moments in there, but half of season 2 is just You know, I think by the time I finish the manga, I will very much say Sekirei was like, and I just want to put the video out for it because I feel like Sekirei doesn't get that kind of love and appreciation like it motherfucking deserves. So praise the Sekirei. Praise the Sekirei. But please leave your thoughts and comments if you've seen Sekirei, if you've read the manga for Sekirei. How do you feel about Sekirei? Because, of course, it being a finished series and the anime never pretty much getting a sequel anytime soon, these kind of conversations are like the last remnants of Sekirei content you'll ever get. And I can kind of go into other videos about why certain characters are my favorites or what I like about other characters. Because like I said, I barely touched on everything here. But leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.